Conditions, early morning in mid-May, looked absolutely perfect for a tench fishing session, and so I headed down to the estate lake. Now, unusually for this trip, I was going to be fishing with 2 rods. Firstly, my trusty holdfast, which I was going to use to leisure down the near margin. I also took along a Mark IV Avon cane rod with which I intended to float fish. I was interested to see which method would prove most productive. Now, having cast the ledger down the near margin, it was simply a case of attaching a bottle top and forgetting about it. With the float rod, I was fishing a method known as the lift float. This is where you set the float slightly under depth and slightly overshotted, so it sinks down, only popping up to the surface when a fish takes the bait. I cast this into the dark water. This is slightly beyond where I'd normally be fishing when I'm doing my usual free lining and sight fishing. It didn't take long for the fish to move in, but unfortunately, rather than a tench I was hoping for, it was an angry carp. Not really what you want to be hooking on an old cane rod. This fish was pretty determined to get down the margin and round the corner into the entrance bay. I had neither the tackle nor the line to really cope with this, so it was a case of just hanging on and hoping for the best. I was also slightly concerned because it was running in the direction of where I had the ledger rod, and this is why I don't normally fish with 2 rods, because what followed next was just a comedy of errors. As I got the fish back along the margin, it managed to get behind the ledger rod, picking up the line in the process. Now, rather than making things better, by waggling the rod tip around, I made it worse and got it properly tangled. So now I had 2 lines running to the fish, but with one of the hooks trailing along the bottom, along with a ledger weight. Not ideal in weedy conditions. Then I thought I could solve it by doing a quick knit one, purl one, and that made it worse again. I'm a complete amateur with anything other than 1 rod. So, as if I hadn't done enough damage, I then tried moving the ledger rod again and again and again, and yeah, nothing was getting any better. And then finally, just as I thought things couldn't get any worse, I thought I'd have one last go at untangling it. And all I succeeded in doing was wrapping the bobbin around the float rod. So now I'd lashed the rods together, and the end tackle was carrying together out in the lake, and I had a carp on, and there was weed in the lake, and I was just making a complete mess of things. Eventually I got the bobbin untangled from the float rod, so I could kind of play the fish. And I think, to be honest, by this point the carp was getting quite embarrassed that it had been hooked by such an incompetent angler. And as I got it into the margin, it basically took the first opportunity it had to jump into the landing net and end this sorry charade before any of its friends saw it. So yeah, we got there in the end. Not the biggest fish in the lake, but far bigger than anything I intended to target, especially on cane rod and tench tackle. But it made for a nice photo on the mat. And I've never seen a carp blush before, but I'm pretty sure this one was when I returned it, as it went to tell all its friends about the complete idiot on the bank. Now, once I got everything untangled, I thought I'd have another go. So I just flicked the ledger rod down the margin again, just a couple of fingers worth. We don't really work in wraps with centre pins, we work in fingers worths. And then put it back on the rest. And set the bobbin. Now you can see there I'm using a centre pin, and that's by far my favourite reel to use. I was very fortunate to make the acquaintance of a gentleman by the name of Mr. Richard Carter, who's held very, very highly in the world of centre pin making. And if you look on the back, it says Aerial Gem number 6. And having seen Mr. Carter's order book, I know that Aerial Gem number 5 was made for and owned by Chris Yates. Pretty sure that's the closest my name's ever going to get to his in print, and certainly in success. But that's attached to my holdfast, and then on the other rod I have a Mitchell 300A on a Norman Agater's Mark IV Avon split cane rod. It's not a super old rod, but it is built to the original taper designed by Richard Walker. So quite a historic way of fishing. And as we zoom out, you just catch a glimpse of the float sitting just beneath the surface. There it is there. And as we come back in, you see there's another fish on the spot. So there was a fair bit of activity, but alas, once again, it was another carp, still not the tench I was after, and alas, once again, it was putting a tremendous bend in a rod that has a test curve little more than a pound, and a cranky old reel that doesn't really like going around. And while I was playing this fish, it really took me back to and gave me an insight into how earlier anglers saw the carp as an impossible animal to land, an impossible fish, because I had absolutely no control on it. And really the only saving grace was the modern monofilament. I think if I'd been using period line, there's no way you'd land a fish of this size. And it's not huge by today's standards. But the tackle just isn't up to stopping it in any sort of lake that's unmanaged. Any lake with weed or snags or gravel bars, you wouldn't stand a hope in hell. But luckily this lake has got a bit of management about it. It still has weed, but not too much at the moment. So I was able to play the fish in relative comfort, although it did a few laps of the lake first. And eventually, this one too had had enough and came to the net. Thankfully, it didn't involve dragging in all the leisure tackle as well, which was a slight bonus, so I redeemed myself somewhat. Now the fight took about 17 minutes, and when you see the size of the tail on this fish and the torpedo shape, you understand why. Just a phenomenal looking fish, very streamlined, great fun. So an unsuccessful tench fishing trip, but a very enjoyable day.